everyone. This is Maheen, and welcome to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. Today, we're looking at your physical storefront, not just as a location, but as one of your most powerful business tools. Because in 2026, the difference between a passerby and a loyal customer often comes down to the science of what they see the moment they walk through your door. Joining us is Annie Narsassian, the founder and creative director of VMID Inc., with a powerhouse background as a former national visual merchandising coordinator for Adidas and Reebok Canada, and he now brings that same big brand strategy to independent retailers. She's here to show us how to transform retail spaces into high-performing environments that drive real results. So without further ado, let's dive in and welcome our guest, Annie. Annie, it's a pleasure having you on the show today. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm doing great. Thank you for that amazing introduction. How are you doing today?
Absolutely. I mean, your intro was quite a mouthful, but it was very impressive, and we are very excited to break it down for our listeners and see what they can find of value through our conversation. Annie, would love to begin our conversation by understanding that critical business tool that I kind of spoke about in my intro. Many retailers, they treat store presentation as an afterthought, but you view it as a strategic engine for sales. Please tell us, why do retailers really underestimate store design, and how does it affect customer behavior?
I think, well, let's be honest with small business owners, we're always going to be very cost sensitive. So it sounds like it's a very high cost item. And when we think that something is not quite priority, we're not going to give it the same attention. So it can cost a lot, yes, but that doesn't mean that it's not worth the investment. For starters, your store is not just an area where you're holding your stock. You are presenting it, and you are creating a showroom essentially of not only your products, but your whole brand image. So it's important to really see it as a showroom. That's why it's important to be very intentional in terms of store design. And you cannot sell products if you don't have people walking through your door. So a part of giving people a reason to walk in your door is to have the experience and that entertainment basically of actually being inside the store. So we always hear how important experience is in retail these days, and the design and the way they are able to shop is definitely a part of that. So it's important because we really want to give our brands and our products the glory that they deserve and the showcase. That's why it's important to be strategic and mindful when it comes to not only store design, but even deeper than that, visual merchandising. Another thing is many people think that it is going to be a high cost item, and it's not necessarily always the case. Sometimes there's small tweaks that we can do, and sometimes it's actually about what you already have. You're just reconfiguring in a different way so that your space is more shoppable. So it's not an extra spend in terms of things to purchase. It's just a different way of doing things. So it's really
Right.
just learning visual merchandising so that you can use it for the tool that it is.
Now, really understanding that your floor plan is actually a silent salesperson, it completely changes how we really prioritize our daily operations. Now, Annie, let's explore the common visual merchandising mistakes that can push customers away. Please tell us more about these mistakes. Like, what common mistakes do retailers make, and how can they really fix them?
So one common idea is that if you have this huge assortment, you have to show everything so that you can sell it all. But that's not necessarily the case. It's sort of like when you go to a restaurant and you have too many items on the menu, you no longer really understand what you want, and you might not feel that temptation anymore. So it's important to be very curated in terms of your presentation. Just because you have everything doesn't mean you should be showing everything. When you do, it's very overwhelming for customers. They don't know what to look at, they don't know where to go. It just feels like a task basically to look through everything, rather than if they walk in, everything is clearly organized in a way that they understand which sections are the ones that are relevant for them, what products actually belong together. They can then understand how they can navigate the space and shop on their own, which is ideally the best type of retail, where the customers don't need to 100% depend on the sales staff to walk them through the space. If that's the case, then chances are you're treating your store space as a stock room rather than a functioning retail space. So I would say definitely curating the assortment, but setting it up in a way that customers understand how to shop.
hmm That is very insightful, Annie. And you're right. Simplifying the customer's visual path is often the fastest way to really increase that average transaction value at the till. Next up, let's discuss how small businesses can improve their stores without really the large investments. How can retailers improve their space with a very limited budget or maybe a small footprint?
So when we talk about small footprints, we're talking about the actual floor space. And that is when being really strategic about space planning is very important. So without even spending, just seeing if the zones that you are currently using actually make sense. And that's based on what type of products you're grouping together. If it's actually based on how customers are shopping, or if it's how you prefer it to be to access, again, like it's a stock room. So one thing is looking at your space plan in terms of the zoning. Another is your fixture layout to see if you're really optimizing your space where every inch has a purpose, whether that's filling in as much of the space that you can with fixtures while being mindful of key walkway spaces, but also carving out those intentional breaks and pauses and visual pulls so that it is enjoyable for a customer to walk through and gain inspiration, not just options for shopping. And then we have to flip our perspective to the frontal view. So while we might be optimizing the space plan, then we need to think about vertical spaces. The smaller your floor spaces, the more you need to rely on vertical space and see where you might have opportunities to create more surfaces so you can distribute your products better for more premium presentation.
This is important to understand that high impact merchandising is clearly about strategic placement and really lighting rather than just expensive fixtures. And to all the retailers that are watching us, in 2026, your store is your most valuable real estate. So don't let a single square foot go to waste. Start using tools that are available to you, like Annie's DIY kits that we'll be talking about, and really reclaim your space as a sales driving machine. Now, coming back, let's right to the tools and the support that can help execute this effective merchandising strategies. Annie, how should retailers choose between full service audits or DIY merchandising tools?
It's really the difference of if you have less time or money. I think everybody is struggling with having really busy schedules and having to be really mindful of their budget. So it's really, what are we going to work with? If you feel you have a little bit of time you can invest rather than money, then I would say start with the DIY merchandising tools. On one hand, it's more economical than somebody else doing it for you, but you're also learning new skills and developing your understanding of visual merchandising for you, for your staff members, and then the next size up from there, because it is still working with your own perspective and your learnings. The next level up would be, let's say, an audit where you would have an expert to really dig into your space and your business and tell you all of the ways that they can all the opportunities that they find in making your space work better from you for the whole consumer journey. And with that, again, that would mean you decide whether that's something you can execute yourself. It could be changes you make in the next days, weeks, months, or even years. Or if you want to make that jump and say, hey, I'm going to have somebody else do that for me. But that's sort of the middle point in being served. And of course, full service would be the highest cost in a lump sum, but that would mean you are alleviated and you are saving time and maybe even money from reworking things again and again and again by having somebody really make the decisions for you. Of course, in collaboration, coordinate the labor for you to get the hands-on help where you can put your focus in other areas of your business, especially when you're at the point that you really cannot afford to put this much time and energy into one aspect of the retail business. And then, of course, if you see that this service seems to be a full-time thing, that's a sign that maybe this should be internal instead. So you
Right,
also
right.
have to consider if it makes sense to outsource or if you have someone internally that can absorb some of the duties, but it's very important to ensure they have the proper training to do that.
Choosing the right support is so important, and we can't really emphasize more on it. Matching our support level to our current growth stage really ensures that we get the highest ROI on our store's presentation. So thank you for highlighting that, Annie. Finally, let's explore how strong visual merchandising creates lasting customer impressions. What simple changes can really create a memorable in-store customer experience?
So I think that initial first impression is super important to consider. And when we walk in, the first thing we feel right away is this right space for me or not? Counter to that, if it's crowded, the fixture layout doesn't make sense, you feel like you're kind of bombarded and claustrophobic, you're going to feel like this isn't the right place for me. But when you open those doors and you feel that initial pull to walk and want to explore, you see validation of the brand and the brand standards, everything is nice and tidy and organized well, you understand the scope, then that builds into your memory that this is a store worth returning to. This is a credible store. So beyond the entire journey of visual merchandising that we can talk about, I think that everything that stands out upon entrance is the most important thing, starting from the storefront, and that feature zone as soon as you walk in will set your impression of the store.
Mhm. Well, that is, good to know that when the shopping experience feels natural, it feels curated, customers don't just really buy, they become the long-term advocates for the brand. This was such a great conversation. Annie, I recently visited a Zara store here in Square One, and it was different. It felt really high end compared to what they, used to serve about a year ago. And I've been lately shopping online, so I don't get to, really feel the experience as much. But yeah, it was different, and I felt kind of odd because everything was placed very distantly, and it was just harder to kind of, curate, just in the mind that what I need now, or what did I even come for. So thank you so much for letting us know the importance of how to create a memorable in-store customer experience, and how can even the small retailers achieve that. Now, as you wrap up, what advice would you give retailers whose stores feels outdated?
I would say it's really important to get an outsider's eyes, basically, whether it's a trusted friend or a business buddy, someone outside of your store, because you stop noticing things when you're in the same space every single day. So you might already see some things that are outdated, but chances are there's more elements of that. And when the space feels outdated, that reflects on the products as well. So just like your example with Zara, if the same assortment was on a different fixture package where things were tighter or more abundant or dimmer or a different lighting, then it could look cheaper. Not that it's a luxury brand, but still you feel like it's really gotten an elevation that reflects in the products, it reflects on the customer's impression of the assortment and whether it's worth purchasing. So a piece of advice would really just to try to see everything from a fresh perspective. It could be yourself comparing yourself to your competitors, but it's highly recommended to ask someone you trust that is not in your space every single day, so that they can very honestly tell you what things might be degrading your impression to customers, or new customers for sure.
Right. Well, that is a great reminder, Annie, that even the smallest change in perspective can really refresh an entire business. So thank you so much for joining us and for sharing such great expertise and insights.
Thank you so much for having me.
And listeners, that was Annie Narcessian from VMID Inc., a masterclass on how to turn your retail space into a high functioning tool that attracts, engages, and converts. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. Please be sure to subscribe and visit CanadianSME.ca. To learn more about how we are supporting the ecosystem, please visit Canadian SME Small Business Foundation at smbfoundation.ca. A special shout out to our partners, UPS and ADP, for their ongoing commitment to empowering small businesses across Canada. Please keep thriving, and we'll see you in the next one.